Netflix has released its new series, The Dinosaurs, and I have thoughts. There is a range of animals in this series, some good and some not so good. What I want to mention is how they show the extinctions. These took thousands or millions of years. Good job on showing the Carnian pluvial event, by the way. But the Ranchosaurs were a very successful group for millions of years after. They did not wake up one morning to find trees everywhere and die in an afternoon. They also amp up the action, making everything seem like an instantaneous catastrophe. Extinctions were not all sudden disastrous events. The end Triassic extinction was unusually quick, taking about 600,000 years, not splitting up Pangaea like slices of a pizza. Also, yes, the impact caused earthquakes, but not the opening of bottomless pits. I mean, come on. If we pay attention, we can see that these changes happened over millions of years. And sometimes this is said, but the visuals do not show that. As YouTube essayist Lindsay Ellis once said, framing and aesthetics supersede the rest of the text. Always, always, always. This series looks at the Morrison Formation in a novel way, focusing on Allosaurus and Stegosaurus rather than the sauropods. The Stegosaurus. I don't like them. The posture is very 1950s, slouched as opposed to high and alert. The colour is all elephantine grey, and the thagomizers are pointing the wrong way. They should be pointing horizontal and straight out. There may have been a thin layer of keratin over them, but not whatever this is. I have no idea who thought they should look less like Walker's crisps and more like McCoy's. Sad to see a better Stegosaurus done in 2011's Planet Dinosaur. They seem to be based on old museum mounts, which will lead to problems. And Allosaurus. What did they do to my beautiful boy? They really Jurassic Worldified this dinosaur, gave it all these weird proportions. Look at the massive feet and the crocodile back. We found plenty of Allosaurus and none have osteoderm-ridden skin. The battle damage is nice though, as Allosaurus seems to have been a very rough and tumble dinosaur. When the Stegosaurus get together, apparently the Allosaurus has difficulty telling where one animal begins and another ends. This mimics talk of motion dazzle in zebras. Not exactly debunked, but definitely dubious. I have no problem with an Allosaurus getting stuck into a fight with a Stegosaurus, as we have evidence of this happening. But the experienced female keeps biting the plates. Also, the tail has to do some weird stuff to get the spikes to stick. No kidding, as they're pointing in the wrong direction. It does end in cannibalism, which is likely for dinosaurs like this, and it first bites the pubis between the legs, which we do have evidence for in an Allosaurus fossil. Not the kind of specificity that I expected to see here. One thing they bring up is the Stegosaur extinction. They say brought on by flowers and tough vegetation. In the Jurassic, just about everything was tough. Large herbivores were so widespread in North America because their huge bellies were able to break it down. This idea about flowers driving out the stegosaurs is from the 90s, and is not supported now with evidence of stegosaurs surviving well into the Cretaceous in Asia. Their decline in diversity seems to be linked to the loss of cycads, a notoriously tough plant that these animals ate. And being replaced by the more advanced jaws of the Ankylosaurs, they had the same jaws. Ankylosaurus might have been able to slide its jaws slightly, but they were both in the same boat, restricted to low-growing plants. Ankylosaurus' teeth were well adapted to tubers and fruit from the new flowering plants, possibly replacing the Stegosaurus' reliance on cycads. But there was nothing so revolutionary about their jaws. Look at the Hadrosaurs for that. I have to admit, I don't like seeing Tyrannosaurus easily taking out adult herbivores. These dinosaurs will go extinct if the biggest, healthy adults could not fend off the most common predator in their environment. In the recent Walking with Dinosaurs, I was so glad that it showed that an adult Triceratops could kill an overconfident Tyrannosaurus if it tried its luck. Fossils show one did try against a Triceratops, and the herbivore walked away, injured but alive. I am of the opinion that a Tyrannosaurus would have to have a death wish if it wanted to actively hunt an Ankylosaurus. Biting the neck would be hit or miss. You might get through the collagen-padded keeled osteoderms and the thick bone collar, but that is a sizable might on a moving target. We don't know exactly Ankylosaurus' armor arrangement, but its defenses increase the closer you got to its head. It seems as though Ankylosaurid tail clubs were primarily for intraspecific combat, but that they also served an effective secondary purpose as predator deterrence. Since nodosaurids thrived under tyrannosaurs without tail clubs, I find it difficult to swallow that ankylosaurids would not have been avoided like the plague. This is indicated in the fossil data, where increased diversity of ankylosaurs increased the diversity of all other herbivores, supposedly due to predator deterrence. I also dislike the tipping over of a potentially 8-ton low quadruped by a possibly 7-ton biped. Seems a bit like the cow tipping over myth to me by people who have never encountered a cow. But the worst, the absolute worst, is that this tyrannosaur is a mother. In tyrannosaur environments, feeding traces are found on hadrosaurs almost 3 times more than on ceratopsians, because they're easier to hunt than the ones with horns and frills. Hunting a verifiable shin breaker when you have less fatal options and you have little babies relying on you bringing them food seems like a strategy that is not going to work out well for you. The introduction of Spinosaurus in this series focuses on its size. The framing makes it look enormous, and it's described as the largest predator to ever walk the earth. That word largest is doing some work. The current estimates of Spinosaurus length top out at 15 meters, which is what they give. But weight estimates have not been greater than other large theropods, Carcharodontosaurus, Giganotosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus, since the 2014 re-evaluation that made it look like this. Also, since the recent discovery of Spinosaurus mirabilis, I have leaned towards seeing Spinosaurus as a very ostentatious dinosaur, with as many look-at-me features as its body could handle. But that is a preference thing. This coastal swamp seems to be the Bahariya Formation, where the first Spinosaurus specimens were discovered. They show Spinosaurus swimming, describing it as specially evolved for this, despite it being portrayed as being slower than its prey, and models demonstrating it was more unstable in the water than Tyrannosaurus. The mousetrap-like strategy is weird. First, it can't catch a shark, but it can catch that fish. Then it waits until this shark, looks like it may be a small squalid corax, but I'm no shark guy, swims basically into its mouth. Was Spinosaurus smart enough to do this? Incredibly difficult to tell, but I'm generally dubious of bird-level strategizing being used by non-avian dinosaurs. The research seems to point to them not being dumb, but not that smart. The long snout, the fast bite, and strong muscles on the underside of the neck point towards a darting catcher to me, using its sensitive snout to direct the strike. Basically the hell heron hypothesis. Is this the time of the pissed-off Edmontosaurus? After the megacarnivores like Tyrannosaurus were discovered, these animals have been seen as the passive cows of the Cretaceous, just waiting to get eaten. They had no horns or armor. What did they expect? Well, now they are back with a vengeance. We had an impulsive Albertosaurus trampled to death by Edmontosaurus in the recent Walking with Dinosaurs. And then Netflix's The Dinosaurs gave us this. Zebras are perhaps the best analogue of why Edmontosaurus might have been such a powerhouse. Zebras live around wild dogs, hyenas, and lions, but have no horns or seemingly any defenses. They survive because they are vicious, aiming their mule kick at the predator's head with intent. Hadrosaurs were big, heavy, and could have given a killer kick with all that muscle around the rump. Any predator would underestimate one at its peril. We know more about Edmontosaurus than any other ornithopod, so check out my video on Iguanodon, where I mention some of what we have found out about this dinosaur that was so much more than T-Rex fodder. Despite what I have said previously, a lot of this series I like, but I hate this. Copying one of the most teeth-grinding scenes from Jurassic Park, I hate the wiping sand of fossils. There is so much work, effort, and expertise in getting these fossils out of the rock, and there are hours of footage of this. You spent more money to show something that does not happen. They do bring up a swimming dinosaur that I find is a far better representative of a swimmer than Spinosaurus, Hesperornis. This is depicted as a swimmer and diver in the sea, which is in line with current reconstructions. The feet are shown to be lobed rather than webbed, which seems to be an open question at the moment. And while I find the mosasaur beaching a bit much, there is evidence that plesiosaurs, like this one, certainly took a bite at these things. There is also an emphasis in this series on bloodlines, like this.
She's picked up a scent, something worthy of her bloodline.
It's freaking food. Her bloodline is worthy of food? There is talk of the dinosaur dynasty and the spread of the dinosaur empire, As if these aren't a diverse group of animals with vastly different and opposing objectives in their lives and adaptations, being looked at in hindsight and framed from a spread and conquest point of view. It's just bizarrely Victorian. Using this framing, the Cenozoic is known as the Age of Mammals, and certainly mammals encompass the most spectacular animals alive today, with 27 orders and about 6,640 identified species. However, birds have 44 orders and over 11,000 identified species. They occupy every continent and landmass on the planet, including Antarctica. Some fly, some walk, and some swim. Could it be that the age of the dinosaurs never truly ended, just that us mammals came out of the shadows? Even though 25% of all identified species are beetles.